There are few medical terms that are as loaded as the body mass index, or the BMI, a simple, non-invasive formula that's commonly used to screen for obesity. Obesity is a serious disease that can increase a person's risk for the leading causes of death, such as heart disease, stroke, and diabetes. But in recent years, there has been a reckoning on how the BMI is used to diagnose obesity. Many are saying that it's flawed. And in January 2023, 6 obesity care organizations issued a statement flat out saying that the BMI is not a measure of body fat. We've known for a long time that the BMI has its limitations. For example, athletes who have a lot of muscle mass could be classified as obese. It was also developed in mostly European populations, which makes it an inconsistent tool for everyone else. For example, Asian Americans have lower BMI cutoffs.
I think we have been too fixated on BMI in the most part. BMI seems to be very good at the population level. If you want to know if this population has more obesity than this other population, then it's a great measurement. But at the individual level, it is not that good because a person with a BMI of 28 might be much healthier in many ways because has a lot of muscle mass, preserved muscle, is exercising every day compared to the person with a BMI of, say, 25.
So for all its simplicity, how did the BMI become the measure of something as complex as obesity? Let's take a look at the history. The body mass index is the ratio between weight in kilograms and the square of a person's height in meters. The formula is also known as the Quetelet index, after Lambert Adolphe Quetelet, a Belgian polymath who created the formula in the mid-1800s. Quetelet was many things: an astronomer, a mathematician, a statistician, a poet, and an artist. Ever obsessed with numbers, he wanted to find the mathematical laws that govern human populations. His main goal was to find the physical and moral characteristics of the average man, which to him represented the type of perfection. Anything that deviates from that would constitute deformity and disease. As an aside, Quetelet wasn't a eugenicist, but his ideas influenced the father of eugenics, Francis Galton, and his methods became the foundation for scientific racism. To find his average man, Quetelet compared the heights and weights of hundreds of men, women, children, and infants from all over Europe, pulling records from hospitals, orphanages, and even factories with workers as young as 9 years old. He found that for adults past the age of puberty, their weight is nearly the square of their height, and thus the Quetelet index was born. In the 1900s, the standards for what people considered normal weight came from an unlikely source: the insurance industry.
Initially, insurance companies just basically wanted to not insure bad risks. So they did a lot of what we would call epidemiology just to identify them, right? And then not insure them. But there was a bit of a revolution in the insurance industry in the 1870s and 1880s, where they figured out you could make more money by insuring some bad risks just at higher rates.
With lots of data gathered from policyholders, insurance companies worked together to see what factors affected mortality.
These big mortality investigations showed all very consistently that basically weight for height, which was the insurance company's preferred measure of obesity, predicted excess mortality. It was quite a strong predictor.
The insurance companies published tables that showed how much a person should weigh according to their height. These tables were eventually found in doctors' offices across the country, setting the standard for what's considered healthy. After World War II, heart disease became the leading cause of death in the United States, and the government poured money into research. People were beginning to understand that being overweight and obese, along with high blood pressure and high cholesterol, contributed to developing cardiovascular disease. So the insurance industry, working with the US Public Health Service and the American Medical Association, launched a national campaign against overweight and obesity, which included ads like this one called Cheers for Chubby.
Go ahead, pour it on.
American physiologist Ansel Keys became a vocal critic of these campaigns and insurance studies and their findings. His colleagues once wrote that it irritated him throughout his professional life. Don't get me wrong, Keys thought that obesity was disgusting as well as a hazard to health and ethically repugnant. But he didn't like how insurance companies defined obesity as excess weight for height.
About half the total fat of the body is right under the skin. By comparing the results of underwater weighing with skin fold measurements, we're beginning to learn how to estimate the total fat by the simple caliper.
For years, he advanced the idea of directly measuring body fat and downplayed the risks of excess weight. According to his colleagues, he believed that overweight was not necessarily overfat, and obesity, while ugly, does not itself cause heart disease and was not necessarily dangerous for mortality risk. He ultimately put his measure of body fat to the test in his landmark 7-country study. You may know this as a study that established a link between saturated fat and heart disease, which led to the popularity of low-fat diets. Here's where Catalase index re-enters the picture. In 1972, Keys published research comparing different measurements of obesity. These included his measure of body fat using skin fold calipers and Catalase index, which he renamed the body mass index. He concluded that the body mass index proves to be, if not fully satisfactory, at least as good as any other relative weight index as an indicator of relative obesity. So the BMI was, good enough? After all that drama, going against the insurance tables that use weight for height and downplaying their findings, Keys landed on a measure that's, well, based on weight and height.
BMI's introduction, simplified research on obesity, but it also obscured 3 or 4 decades of important work on obesity. And whatever Keys' intention may have been, its introduction was a big setback to the field of obesity epidemiology because it essentially nullified lots of important work that the insurance industry had already done.
In 1985, the National Institutes of Health changed their guidelines and tied the body mass index to its definition of overweight and obesity, which continues to this day. So knowing all this history, where does that leave us? I talked to Dr. Francisco Lopez Jimenez, who studies cardiovascular health and obesity at the Mayo Clinic.
We need more research trying to determine what is really the ideal or the best way to assess fat-related problems or excessive fat. So we understand now that it's not just the amount of fat, it's the location of fat and also the type of fat. I think what needs to happen in clinical practice is to embrace alternative ways to assess body fat or adiposity. And because those methods are relatively simple, there is really no reason why not to use those things.